What is going on, everybody? Welcome back or welcome to the channel. Today we are going to be testing hooks. It's fairly simple. Everybody uses hooks to catch fish, so today I wanted to go through a 3-step phase and see how these hooks fare. Now we're going to be testing the strength of these hooks, seeing when they bend. We're going to be testing the sharpness of these hooks and stickiness to see how they actually do as far as hookups go and how many fish you can hook up on. And then we'll be testing out the hold of the barb. So last but not least, once you actually hook those fish, we want to make sure we can actually hold on to them, so we're going to see how hard it is to actually pull those out. So we'll be talking about the tests once we get into them. Now, if you guys are interested in picking up any of these hooks, you can go and do so at shopkarls.com. But not only do they have awesome hooks over there, they have tons of great gear, tons of great accessories, rods, reels, clothing, anything anglers will need. So make sure you get over there to shopkarls.com and take a look at all the awesome stuff they got, and use my checkout code RYANR10 to save yourself even more money at checkout. Big shout out to Shop Karls for sponsoring today's video. Now let's talk about these tests. Now the first hook we'll be trying out will be the EWG hook by Stickies. This is a pretty nice hook, and I've tried them out previously. I'll have to say they're one of my favorite. Secondly, we have the VMC triple barb fast grip EWG 3/0 hook. Yeah, that's a lot to take in, but this is once again another one of my favorite hooks. They tend to hold onto the fish if you barely hook them, which is a big reason why I wanted to test them out today. Then we got one of the most famous brands, the Gamakatsu, or however you say this. I always say the name, but this is definitely one of the most proven names when it comes to hooks and hook creation. A lot of jig makers, a lot of people just use these hooks in general. And then we got one of my all-time favorites, the RYANR hooks. Now these things tend to be sharp as can be and sticky as can be. I've also lost a few fish on them as well, but for some reason they are one of my favorites. They just hold true value and they tend to be a really good hook. Now this next hook is the only hook that is not an EWG, and it is also not a 3/0 like the rest of these. This is going to be a 4/0 worm style hook by Guggen, and it's just an extra hook that I had in the mix, so I said why not try it out. Just wanted to get a better idea of this. After that, we're going to be trying the Daiichi hooks. I hope I'm saying that right. This is a 3/0 once again hook, and these things came in an MTB, so I said let's go ahead, test them out. If you guys are not sure what an MTB is, it is a Mystery TackleBox, and you guys can pick them up at shopkarls.com as well. Now the last and final hook is one of the coolest looking one. It is a Titanium Pro Series Prism hook. Now these are once again 3/0 EWG hooks, but as you can see they got a pretty cool look to them. Nice tint. It looks like they torched them with a torch and kind of gave them a really cool look. But those are going to be the 7 hooks we're going to be testing out today. Let's go ahead and dive right into this. So the first hook we'll be testing out is the sticky hook with the barb hold test. As you can see, this thing was easy to get in. Gave it a nice pull on the outward and it was not budging. Definitely a hard holding hook, and I would have to grade it a 10 out of 10. Next, we got the VMC Fast Grip Wide Gap hooks. These things once again have 3 barbs on them, very easy to penetrate, and they tend to hold fish just with the slightest bit of skin on the hook. Easy in, once again, and a little bit easy out too. I'll have to say, I did notice there was a little bit of cardboard left behind, so maybe we might be damaging the fish. I'd have to rate these things an 8 out of 10 just for that. Next, we got the Gamakatsu. Now, these things are well-renowned. I don't even know if I'm saying it right, but they definitely penetrate that cardboard very easy going in. But I'll have to say, when I tried to pull them out, it felt like it came out a little too easy for me. Because of that, I feel like I'm going to rate them an 8 out of 10. Next, we'll be trying out the RYANR hook. Once again, one of my favorites, and they tend to be a very sharp hook. As you can see, it penetrates the cardboard with ease, and then I try to remove this hook, and as you can see, it does not want to budge. Just another proven reason why it's one of my favorites, 10 out of 10. Next, we'll be testing out the Guggen hammer hooks. Once again, this is not an EWG hook, and this is one of the only hooks that is not wire. Because of that, as you can see, it is a little bit harder to get these things to penetrate the cardboard, but that barb holds like a charm. As you can see, almost ripped the cardboard box apart. 10 out of 10 hold on those things. Next, we have the Daiichi World's Sharpest Hooks. Now, they say World's Sharpest Hooks. Let's go ahead and try this out. Easy penetration with this thing. I'll have to say, went in probably the easiest of them all, and I was quite surprised when I was trying to remove this hook. As you can see, I struggled probably more than any of the other hooks with similar structure and small barbs, so I'll have to rate this thing 10 out of 10, maybe even 11 out of 10. I was really impressed with this thing. I even had to give it a second try. Next, we'll be testing out the Prism hooks. This is one of the only other hooks that is not wire besides the Guggen hook, but it is an EWG still. As you can see, they go in that cardboard fairly easy, bending or not. And when I actually tried to pull these things out, I was pretty impressed. That Barb did hold fairly well, even almost knocked down my camera. I'm gonna rate them a 10 out of 10 on hold. Our next test, we'll be seeing the stickiness of each hook, or how sharp the actual tip is, by dragging it across this paper and seeing if it catches or how it catches. First, we got the sticky hook, held fairly well, nice and sticky. Gave it a few rubs with that sandpaper, which is very similar to a bass's mouth, and it still held, so we're gonna give it another go. 4 strokes on that sandpaper block. The hook finally lost its stickiness. I'll have to rate this a 10 out of 10. Next, we'll be testing out the VMC Fast Grip. They are holding fairly well on that first strike. After a second strike though, it's almost like it went away right away. On the third time, it was still holding, just not as much as it was at the beginning, so we gave it one more strike, and as you can see, it was sliding all over the paper. So 4 strikes later, this hook is dull. I'll have to rate it a 10 out of 10. Up next, we have the Gamakatsu 3/0 hook. Now, as you can see, this thing is definitely gripping very nice and sticky, so we're gonna rub it up against that sandpaper and get it rough. Second time around, it is still gripping, still grabbing. It's actually shaving paper towards the bottom of my table, which is kind of cool. Hit it with a third time on that sander, and it is still gripping, but the fourth time seems to be the charm. Once again, another hook dull on the 4th strike, so we'll rate this a 10 out of 10. Next, we have the RYANR hooks. One of my favorite once again, and they tend to be very sharp. As you can see, we can barely get this thing moving down the side of the paper, so we're gonna rough it up real quick. So after 5 strikes and 5 tests on the sandpaper block, I had to give it a skin test just to see if I could feel it holding on my skin, and I could definitely feel this thing still gripping. But once we kind of put it to paper after that, it really wasn't gripping the paper as much anymore. So we're gonna go ahead and call it after that. 5 strikes on the RYANR hook. This thing is definitely a 10 out of 10, and it is gonna be our #1 contender right now. Next up, we're going to be testing out the Guggenhammer hook. Once again, this is a 4/0 hook, the only 4/0 hook, and it is not going to be an EWG hook either. But as you can see, after the first test and the first strike on the sandpaper, this thing is destroying my sandpaper block. I'll have to say the structure of these hooks definitely have some integrity. We're going to go ahead and give it a few more scuffs and a few more tests. I think this block was taking a beating from this hook pretty bad. I had to actually start rotating the block after this hook test because of this hook. As you can see, it is tearing up the side of the binder. It is tearing up the block. It is tearing up everything that it touches. It is still as sharp as can be, and it is definitely durable when it comes to this test. Now, I think in total we got about 7 strikes on this block before this thing made me give up. I actually decided to call the test. We got to a point right here where I was pulling the hook towards the bottom of the binder, and it actually went through multiple pages, and that's kind of when I concluded it, kind of called it and said, all right, that's enough. This hook has definitely won the test. So this is going to be a 10 out of 10 easily. I might have to move those guys that took the 4 strikes down to a 9 out of 10, and we'll keep the RYANR at a 10 out of 10. Next, we have the Daiichi World's Sharpest Hook. Now, once again, I was fairly impressed with this thing. Not a budge on the stickiness, and this is the same hook that I actually penetrated through the cardboard, so I figured it'd be a little bit weak. So we go ahead, rough it up a little bit, try out another piece of paper, and it is still gripping. It is still tearing up. You can see the sanding kind of paper towards the bottom of the table, where it is actually just shaving the paper away. Very sharp hook, but it's a very thin line that it's creating. It's very sticky. I'll have to say, not only is this hook sharp, but it's one of the hooks that is going to be causing the least amount of damage on the fish. So I'll have to say I'm pretty impressed with this hook. I was so impressed with this hook that after the second strike on the block, I decided to rough it up a little bit more on the third time, and I actually got it very dull that last time. So I think I kind of ruined the test on this thing. It probably could have made it to 4 strikes, similar to the first few. So I'll have to rate this thing a 9 out of 10 like the rest of them. Next, we'll be trying out the Prism hook. Now, once again, this is one of the cooler looking ones, and it is definitely a stronger hook. It has a nice grip on that first strike. After a nice little roughing session, it is still pretty grippy, still pretty sticky. So we're going to give it one more wax at it, and onto the paper it goes. After that second strike, this hook is rolling on that paper like a ballpoint pen. That really amazed me. Only 2 strikes on the cardboard before this hook was done. The Prism is going to get the worst rating, a 5 out of 10. We're just going to bump it up to a 5. I'd give it a 4 normally just because of those looks. Now our third and final test is going to be a strength test. I want to see how much pressure you can put on these hooks before they actually break. This is not a very accurate test, but as you can see, we're going to get a good general idea of the weight distribution before they kind of straighten out. First with the sticky hook, as you can see, got it pulling straight down, and this thing takes a whopping 29.8 pounds of force before it gives. I was pretty impressed with this, had to double check, make sure there was no cracks or wears, and as you can see, this thing just has the slightest bit of a bend. I'm going to rate this a 9 out of 10. Next up, we got the VMC Fast Grip Wide Gap 3/0 EWG worm hook. That is a tongue twister to say, and as you can see, this thing takes a whopping 26.3 pounds before we give it, and it took a little bit more of a beating than that sticky hook did at first. Definitely something you're not going to be able to use again. I'm going to rate this a 9 out of 10. Next, we're going to be using the Gamakatsu 3/0 EWG hook. This thing was pretty impressive, I'll have to say. At first, I thought it was going to be a little bit weaker, gave it a slight tug test. 26 pounds is what I was hitting. I said, let's go ahead and actually pull down this thing, see what we can do. And I broke the scale. It turned off on me and then reset in kilograms. So this thing kind of messed up, but I'll have to say it was about 28 pounds of pressure. 29 pounds is what I'll give it before it went out of whack and into kilograms. But the look of this hook, I'll have to say it is RIP. Definitely not going to be able to use it, but because of the strength, we're going to rate it a 9 out of 10. Next, we have the owner hook. Once again, the 3/0 EWG hook. This thing did not take as much pressure I was hoping it to, but 26 pounds is definitely still a good amount of pressure for any EWG hook. Afterwards, took a quick look at this thing, and as you can see, it is definitely not reusable. So I'll have to say that this is going to be another 8 out of 10. Next up, we have the Guggen hammer hooks. This is a 4/0 hook, so it's a little bit longer. And once again, it is not a wire structure. It is going to be a little bit more of a steel structure, and it definitely can show. As you can see, 34 pounds from this thing. Massively impressive. You could probably pull up a tree with that. And as you can see, it still looks good. You could probably bend this thing into place and definitely use it for another day. I'll have to rate this thing a 10 out of 10. Next, we got Daiichi hooks. Pretty impressed with this brand, so let's see how strong it does on the strength test. 26.44 pounds. That is insanely impressive for this small wire hook. Because of the size, shape, sharpness, and everything of this, I'm going to have to rate it a 9.5 out of 10. I just feel like this hook has impressed me in just enough ways to get an extra 0.5. Next up, we have the Prism extra wide gap steel hooks. Now once again, these are not a wire hook, these are similar to the Guggens, so they should take a little bit more pressure, pull down on those things, and as you can see, a whopping 31.22 pounds. This is definitely a strong hook, something you can pull in and out of brush, and you might be even able to pull that brush in with you. And after that test, you can see this thing is a little warped, but you can definitely bend that thing back into place and use it for another day. I'll have to rate this thing a 10 out of 10 for strength test. Now let's go ahead and total these scores up and see which hook came out in first. But before we do that, if you guys enjoyed today's video, please hit that thumbs up button. Think about hitting that subscribe button as well. And if you enjoy these types of videos, make sure you let me know in the comments below. I'm thinking of bringing you guys a few other types of videos that are pretty similar, so I would love to hear your feedback. Now let's go ahead and dive right into these scores. So coming in 7th place with a score of 25 points is going to be the Prism EWG hook. Just ahead of the Prism is going to be a tie with 26 points, and it is going to be the VMC and the Gamakatsu EWG hook. Now, just ahead of that is another tie for 3rd and 4th place with a total of 28 points, and that is going to be the sticky hook and the owner hook. And just passing those guys by a hair with a total of 28.5 due to courtesy points. They just was the most impressive hook to me by far out of all the bunch, and it is the Daiichi World's Sharpest Hook, and coming in 1st place with a total of 30 points. I'll have to say the underdog, something I was not expecting to make it to 1st. It is the Guggen hammer hook, the steel hook, which is honestly not really fair because it is the only hook which was not an EWG, and it is honestly a stronger steel type of hook. I even deducted 1 point just to this casualty, and it still had 29 points, which was just half a point ahead of the Daiichi, which gave Guggen the #1 overall for this hook test. So that is going to be it for today's hook test, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed. If you did, once again, hit that thumbs up button and subscribe, and let me know in the comments below what was your favorite hook and if you guys agreed with the final results. But thank you again for watching, everybody, and we'll catch you in the next one.